Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Zikorsky and I am a licensed psychologist at Tria Orthopedics in Bloomington, Minnesota. Today we're going to talk about some simple strategies that we can use to help combat or stop that bully brain during the COVID virus. So just so you know who I am and a little bit of my background, I'm a licensed psychologist, as I said, in Bloomington, Minnesota. I received my doctorate from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I had an internship and postdoc at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, where I also served as an assistant professor for a couple years. While I was there, I got certified out at Harvard in stress management and resiliency training, so I'm certified SMART, which comes in handy. What I want to talk about today is change, and a lot of us right now are dealing with some pretty substantial changes, whether that is changing in our jobs, our employment status. We're trying to teach kids from home, just kind of a whole bunch of different things going on. And the important thing here to just kind of note is that no change happens without loss. And what a lot of people are experiencing right now, on top of the anxiety, on top of the worry, is actually grief. And when the world around us changes, we do grieve. And some of the things we grieve are the loss of the familiar. So we had an understanding of how things were. We had routines that we liked, favorite coffee shops, favorite restaurants, some of those guilty pleasures that we just had in our habits and routine that were familiar to us that are now kind of out the window. We're stuck, not being able to go out. Our jobs are changing, protocols change kind of on the fly, and it can be really frustrating. We also grieve the security of the future. As jobs have changed for a lot of people, what we thought of the future, could have been that you are close to retirement. And now, you might have taken a 30 to 50% loss on, your assets. That's going to change some of the security you had about the future. You might have been employed in one setting and now put into a labor pool. Or you're told that, your job is non-essential, and that's kind of a kick in the gut, where it just feels like the air is kind of let out of you. And we also lose the comfort of our confidence when you're told your job is non-essential or that you're going to be reassigned. Makes us feel like we're kind of standing on a sandy shore, that waves are coming in and it's just taking our footing out underneath us. And it can feel, again, just overwhelming, like we're out of our comfort zone. One quote here that I like to kind of point out is one from Rick Warren, where it says, "There is no growth without change, no change without fear or loss, and no loss without pain." What we're going to talk about today is how, when we go through painful events, which in life is unavoidable, we sometimes attach thoughts and beliefs to those changes that amplify the suffering that we go through. So not only do we go through a painful event, our brains are kind of programmed to hook into those to where we get stuck with long-term suffering, dealing with that bully brain. So for an example here, we're going to do a little bit of psychoeducation. This is the cognitive behavioral triangle, CBT triangle, if you will. And, as most things in life start off with, there's a situation, something happens. In this case, COVID begins to spread and we have a thought, like, oh no, this is going to be awful. That thought leads to a feeling. That feeling can be worry, fear, anxiety, dread. So what do? When we're uncomfortable, we feel like bad things are happening, we have a lot of free time at home. We hop on social media, we go in the news, we talk about it with other people constantly, and we kind of obsess over it to where, again, we kind of hit panic zone. People start hoarding toilet paper and all of that kind of thing. And all of a sudden now, the situation changes a little bit. Now our work hours are adjusted, or our work just changes in general. We're sent home. You have to now figure out how to entertain kids while maintaining a full-time job. And that thought, because we have that worry, fear, and dread, and we've been talking to other people, on Facebook and all of that, that thought is amplified. So now that thought becomes, shucks, like I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my security. I'm going to not be able to retire, fill in the blank. But that thought now is stronger. So those feelings become stronger. So instead of feeling fear and worry and anxiety, all of a sudden we're panicked. We might feel anger, terrified. We might feel alone, like we're the only ones going through this. When you're sent home from a job site and other people get to work and you don't, it can feel really isolating. So again, our behaviors then become more severe. We might overengage with work. We're like, I got to show that I'm indispensable. We start trying to overcommit, kind of hyper-focusing, trying to be just kind of the gunner in our jobs, and that can lead to burnout. Or, if we feel like we're really alone in what we're going through, we might isolate from other people. Stop checking in on others, not checking in with work, and again, just feeling like the bottom's dropping out, that we're really alone. There's a wonderful quote from a man named Winston Churchill who said, "When I look back on all the worries, I remember the story of the old man who said on his deathbed that he had a lot of troubles in his life, most of which had never happened." What tends to happen with our brains is we are really good at predicting the worst case scenario of a situation moving forward. So when we see that work hours are going to be adjusted, we're like, shoot, I know I'm going to get fired. Or your head hits the pillow and you go through, your bully brain kicks on and you go through all of your failures from the day, like, oh, I snapped at my kids, or I was short with my spouse, or whatever. And the hard part with this is that when we worry about things from a physiological perspective, we experience that phenomena. So even if we don't go through that experience in reality, we've already walked through it. And if we do, like worst case scenario comes through, you've experienced it now twice. So again, it's amplifying that suffering. So we're going to do a little psychoeducation on Cognitive Therapy 101. And that's just the premise that our feelings usually come from thoughts. We kind of believe there's that linear relationship. Sometimes those thoughts are negative and seem to happen without much conscious awareness. We call them negative automatic thoughts. God knows we don't need any help needing to learn how to be negative, or no one needs to teach us how to worry. It's something that is just kind of natural to us as a species. And again, they happen automatically. So having negative automatic thoughts is not something to beat yourself up over. It is something that is incredibly human. But the concern is that if we have recurring negative thoughts, or if we have recurring negative thought patterns or cognitive distortions in the literature, I like to call them bully brain, it makes us feel really anxious and depressed. So again, we're amplifying our suffering from a painful event. And if we can examine those negative thoughts rationally, we can lead to less anxiety and more happiness. If we learn how to name it to tame it, kind of call ourselves out on it. Sometimes awareness is a really big deal. And oftentimes the way we feel is more related to the way we look at a situation rather than the situation itself. There's an analogy of two kids driving to Disneyland, which is probably a poor example right now given that everything's shut down. But if you're driving from Minnesota to Disneyland, one kid in the car says, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" The entire trip. Hates the entire journey, gets there and is finally relieved, like, oh man, I finally grinned and bared it, and here we are. The other kid, plays my cow. If you're from Wisconsin, spotting cows, they look at, alphabet things for the license plates, look at different landmarks. You both reach the same destination, but one had a horrible time getting there and the other enjoyed themselves. So it's just kind of how you look at it. So the first, bully brain tactic or cognitive distortion we're going to talk about is just all or nothing thinking. And this is just seeing things as black or white with no in-betweens. So there is no gray. This leads to a lot of anxiety and depression, and often results in like really rash kind of quick decisions on things. Examples of this would be like, if I'm not an essential employee, then I'm nothing. Or if I struggle from working at home, I'm a failure. Oh, I got laid off. It means that I'm absolutely worthless. We just see things again as black and white. The organization responded appropriately, or they really don't care about anybody. They've mismanaged the whole thing. The reality is the truth is gray. But again, we kind of fall into these good or bad kind of categories. Another one is overgeneralization, which is just seeing bad things as being part of like a large overall pattern that inevitably repeats. This leads to like depression and apathy, where like, doesn't matter what I do, I have no agency in life. Bad things are always going to happen. There's nothing I can do about it. Kind of the hallmark of depression. Turn down again, I'm never going to have a partner. A lot of people are feeling lonely. One person in town got the virus, I'm 100% going to catch it. Oh, I have a sore throat, that means I must have it. It's kind of that Eeyore mentality. So, I didn't see you there. Well, that's all right, Eeyore said as he sat down. Nobody ever does. Chances are someone like this in your life or workplace or whatever, just kind of has a problem for every solution. Again, it's really easy to fall into this during these times of stress. Mental filtering is just magnifying the negative aspects of a thing and filtering out the neutral or positive aspects. The big thing here, as the coronavirus has been huge in the media, is ignoring the fact that most symptoms are mild, and mild is a relative term. Mild might be the worst flu you felt like you've ever had in your life, but overall, most people recover. But if you watch the news, it's really easy to get stuck in on like the worst case scenarios, kind of the negative stories. One, because those play, people consume them, but two, that just again magnifies the negative aspects of things that are going on. So examples of this would be like everyone who gets the virus is going to be critically ill. They are shutting down the economy. We're going to be paupers soon. Everyone's being so selfish, hoarding food and supplies. So again, we magnify the negative aspects without looking at like the generosity and outreach that other people are doing. Another one is just discounting the positive. So discrediting positive aspects and turning them into negatives. It makes it near impossible to feel satisfied or happy with the result. If someone said, hey, you did a great job at work, we're like, oh, they're just being nice. They're placating me. Social distancing was a good idea, but it wasn't done soon enough. Like, these guys really screwed it up. They told me I was a key asset, but now they threw me in the labor pool. I'm like, great. It's great to be loved, but now I got to work outside my comfort zone. Or I thought I was a good parent, but I snapped at my kid yesterday. It's kind of another one. We've had, again, most people in this time, probably 99 good interactions. You have one poor one. What do you focus on? When you get a review at work, they give you 15 positives, 1 negative. What do you remember? The 1 negative. It's just kind of our brain's tendency to be like Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. Jumping to conclusions is probably the most common. That's making negative guesses about the future or what other people think. This is generally what we call mind reading or predicting the future. So nothing they are ever going to do is going to help stop the virus. I just know it. They're never going to find a vaccine. My job is never going to survive the labor pool. It doesn't matter what I do. No one thinks my job is essential or worthwhile. Common examples of this would be like if you walk into, by the water cooler and people are laughing and your brain just kicks on being a jerk. Like, hey, they're laughing at you. They're talking about you. They know you don't belong here. Just makes us feel, again, low, like we're not worthwhile. Magnification and binocular vision. It's exaggerating the scale of or significance of an event while minimizing the seriousness of another. This is where you see people being like, hey, what's the big deal? It's just the flu. Or way on the other side, like, I woke up this morning and my throat was itchy. I just know I've got the coronavirus. We tend to magnify just the negative things. Again, can lead to feeling isolated or just kind of that doom and gloom outlook on things. Emotional reasoning is incredibly common right now, which is using your feelings about the way things are as proof that that's the reality. You might feel afraid right now, like, we're socially distancing. We're like, you know what? I assume I'm in danger. Like, I feel afraid. It has to be dangerous out. I shouldn't leave the house, or I need to stock up on like bare essential supplies, and you wind up with toilet paper and like 45 cans of kidney beans. Or you feel angry and you're like, you know what? We are assuming other people are doing it wrong. Like, work is messing this up, or this administration, if you want to go global. Or you feel ashamed. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to have done something wrong because I just feel off. I feel like I can't teach my kids. I must be a horrible person. Again, really common. Should and must statements, again, are also very common. Telling yourself that things should be a certain way. This is most common when people are laying down at the end of the day. Your head hits the pillow and your brain's like, hey, let's worry about every possible scenario in the future. Or here's a highlight reel of all the negative things that you've done today. All the times you snapped at your kids or didn't respond to an email. examples of this could be like, hey, they shouldn't treat me that way, or I should have gone into a different career, or we must never leave the house or we're going to get infected. It can lead to a lot of rigidity in our experience. Labeling, this is another really popular one for people right now, which is oversimplifying traits about yourself or others using emotional wording. Like, only an idiot would struggle with working from home. How hard can it be to set up a telehealth meeting or a WebEx or whatever, Zoom meeting? It's hard. Nothing's easy. They said my job was non-essential. That must mean I'm worthless. Or I was put in the labor pool. That must mean I'm disposable. Like, they just feel like I'm like a weird missing piece. I can fit anywhere. Or if you've been home and you're trying to teach kids and you're getting to that emotional eating, like, I ate an entire quart of ice cream. Like, I am a total pig. In reality, idiots, morons, losers, all of that don't really exist, but people do. And when we fall into that labeling category, one, people resent it, but two, it really makes us feel like we don't have a lot of worth. Blaming and personalization. So placing blame on yourself or others when the blamed person isn't really responsible. So you might have been put in a labor pool or been told, hey, your hours are cut or you're laid off. And we're like, boy, if I were a better employee, I wouldn't be in this situation. If only. If they would have been more careful, we wouldn't need to isolate at home as a society. Or if you're trying to teach your kids, if I were a better teacher, my kids wouldn't struggle with homeschool. Common Core is a pretty difficult curriculum to learn. I know a lot of parents are really struggling with that, but everybody is. But again, we start telling ourselves like, man, if only, if only, if only, if only. So who struggles with cognitive distortions? Well, chances are you're in the everybody club, because everyone thinks this way. There's a reason why there's multiple books published about cognitive distortions. It's because they are common. That bully brain kicks on. So if you notice that you fall into some of these, just take note. We're going to go through an exercise about what we can do about it. So an example of using kind of this name it to tame it technique, and you should have a worksheet that was attached to this PowerPoint with the 10 cognitive distortions or bully brains and a worksheet on how to deal with it. One of the most powerful things you can do is name it to tame it. So if work hours are adjusted or where our work changes, we have that thought of, my gosh, like I'm going to be in an awful situation. We can't make it. I'm going to lose my job. I can't retire. Name it to tame it. What are we falling into? Like, all right, I'm predicting the future. Now, it's not like naming it is a magic wand that makes all the fear and grief and all that go away. But it does enable us to be like, all right, I know that this event is already painful, but my style of thinking is going to amplify my suffering if I'm not careful. So give yourself a little validation. It's perfectly rational to feel afraid given the circumstances. Totally okay. But when you're able to name it and tame it, those feelings aren't as strong. So instead of feeling super anxious, you might have some worry. You might feel a little apprehensive and at unease. But our goal then is to pursue our values. We prepare, we remain calm. When I say pursue values, it's doing the things that matter to you. So instead of responding to a situation out of fear, fear of the virus, or fear of being punished, or just anxiety, we make our decisions based off of what's important to us. Providing for our family, making sure that we have, enough supplies, making sure our neighbors are okay, things like that. So how do we overcome this with that worksheet I gave you guys? So I chose a really common, slight that happens in society. One that happens a lot now that everybody's home and kind of using text messaging and FaceTime and all of that as a means of communication. But something happens. A friend didn't return a text. What's the thought we tell ourselves? We say, oh, I know they don't really care about me. Otherwise, they would have texted me back. Well, how does that make you feel? Pretty crummy, rejected, isolated, angry. And if you're like most people, what do we do in return? Like, I'll show them. I'm going to stop returning their text messages or stop answering their calls. Well, guess what happens if you stop texting them and they stop texting you? You are going to wind up feeling rejected, isolated, because we've kind of created a pattern. So the first thing you do is you ask yourself, are my thoughts accurate? No, not really. Usually they respond to me and include me. People are working from home right now. They might be a little busy. Ask yourself, are my thoughts helpful? No. They make me feel terrible and lonely. No one likes to be that way. Hurts enough feeling like we've been rejected, but if I feel lonely too, it's awful. Am I falling into a thinking mistake or trap, cognitive distortion, bully brain? You bet. I'm mind reading. I'm assuming that they are mad at me, angry, all of that. So what could I say to myself that'd be more accurate or positive? Maybe they're just too busy to respond. God knows when I don't text somebody back, it's usually because I'm in the shower or working. So how would I feel if I told myself this? Better. Life happens. Again, it doesn't just make a magic wand and pain goes away, but it helps us, just moderate the impact that it has on our daily lives. So what makes suffering worse? That big old mean bully brain, as evidenced here, he even looks angry. One thing that's really common is being plugged in but disconnected. So even when we are home, we can often feel isolated because everyone's literally left to their own devices. But making social media comparisons to how we've prepared versus how others have done can make us feel guilty. The big stat here is that 2 hours or more of social media usage is correlated with a 60% increase in clinical depression. So something to be mindful of. Home offices. You might feel like you're somebody on the right, or you can be like me on the left, where I'm literally recording this right now from a walk-in closet in my townhome. I could compare myself to a CEO or just, record a podcast amongst the jeans. It's okay. But again, those upward comparisons we make, we often use as a tool to beat ourselves up. I like to use this just as a, kind of mental representation. And before I talked about no change comes without loss or without pain. Sometimes we have to make sure that we are firmly rooted in our values and those things that matter to us. Sometimes it feels like the foundation's taken right out from underneath us, but we can still thrive if we have a firm foundation of our values and things that are important and that we pursue those. We can grow, even despite feeling like we're on our own. Ultimately, as well, just don't believe everything that you think. Try to acknowledge the way things really are, not the way our brain tells us they are, because our brain, again, is really good at predicting those negativity. I also just want to take a moment and talk about psychological flexibility. Part of doing this is just being connected with the present moment, being mindful. When you are doing something that you're doing, have committed action. Do what matters to you, but throw yourself into it 100%. Don't try to split your attention where you're trying to work from home while watching news briefings, while trying to make kids macaroni and teach math and all of that. Dive in. Have designated times for family, designated times for getting your work done. And being open, accept the way things are, and diffuse yourself from what your brain says it is. So your brain might tell you, you had trouble connecting to that last meeting, they're going to fire you. You say, great brain, thank you for that wonderful information, but I'm still going to be okay. The secret to life, really, for happiness is to have a balance of work, rest, and play. So budget it in. When you're working from home, chances are 3 things are going to go wrong each day. There's going to be a connection issue, a dropped phone call, a sick child, something. If we budget it in, we have more margin to deal with it. What do you do if you're suffering? Connect with others, especially now. Try to make sure that you're calling people for the sake of calling them. I know a lot of people are doing social gatherings, playing board games online, having a wine night, whatever. Getting active. So again, 30 minutes of exercise, 60 to 70% maximum heart rate. It's about the equivalent of taking a low dose antidepressant and Ritalin. Giving to others. No one's gotten poor by giving. Giving to others improves our own agency. So we feel like we're doing something, we're helping, and it helps the other person. It's kind of a win-win. Challenge yourself. Take up a new hobby. I have a lot of people right now who are like, I'm really into sourdough. We're going to start making sourdough starter. Or they're learning to knit, taking up biking. But embrace the moment. There may not be days where everything is wonderful, but chances are there's a moment or two that are positive. Try to find those, embrace them, Care for yourself. Self-care is never selfish. If you're feeling overwhelmed with working and you got kids and your partner, or you feel like you're all alone, it's okay to take some alone time. Even if you have to lock yourself in a bathroom for a moment, catch your breath. That is okay. And reach out for help. There's employee assistance programs. There's a ton of virtual telehealth medicine right now. Make sure you're engaging with that social network. And I would challenge you to use that worksheet and just try to find 3-4 examples that you can use to help getting into the practice of naming it to tame it, or taming that bully brain as you go. If you want some useful resources, I'll just kind of pause here for a moment. You can look at them. There are different YouTube videos, books, and apps that I like to use with patients that are pretty beneficial. They're all free, except for the books. But check them out if you need like a different additional resource. And with that, thank you for your time going through this. If you have questions, please let me know. But most importantly, I hope you're all taking care. We're all in this together, and I hope you all can be well.